What's up, guys, and welcome to another part of the RU tier list discussion. Now, there'll only be, I think, about 3 parts left. So, of course, if you're enjoying it, feel free to leave a like. There's a playlist down below if you missed any of them. And, of course, I have my boy EonX with me today. He can say hi.
Hey, what's up, guys?
And, yeah, today we're starting off with a really cool Mega in the tier, Mega Glalie. You can go first. I have a lot to say as well about this Pokemon, so go ahead.
Alright, so Mega Glalie, as many people who play the tier know, is one of the hardest hitting Pokemon in the tier thanks to Refrigerate boosted attacks. Now what Refrigerate does, if you're unfamiliar with it, it will give a boost to normal type moves and turn them into ice type attacks. So attacks like Double Edge, Return, they become ice type moves. So you have very powerful physical stats to use. It also has, obviously, the Ice Shard, which is very nice for priority, especially with the Scarflygons running around. You can revenge kill them easily. And even just the Choice Band ones, you don't have to risk that speed tie with them. You can just hit them up with Ice Shard, they're gone, you don't have to worry about them anymore. And pretty much anything that's just, you know, weakened, worn down, and within range, you can just use it on. It also has Spikes, which is really, really nice. Considering it beats Flygon, it can pressure Blastoise with Freeze Dry. So it's a really great Pokemon in the tier.
Yeah, I actually think Mega Glalie is such a cool Mega in the tier itself, especially because of Freeze Dry, which allows it to get through the likes of Blastoise and Alomola. I actually think that if Alomola is banned, this Pokemon will become even better, as its moves will be more spammable. I think if that makes sense. Basically, when Aloe is around, I'm either forced to go for Freeze Dry because I already know that Return plus Freeze Dry won't knock it out anyway. Or I go for Return and Aloe eats it up and just wishes. And if it is running a bit of special defense, it isn't too KO'd by Freeze Dry. I also feel like this Pokemon could be better because it does have Earthquake as well, but it doesn't do too much to Registeel, which is the main mon that's hitting. It obviously takes out Magneton as well, but I feel like the Spike set would just become a lot better.
Now, the thing with Freeze Dry is you can run special attack investment to make sure that it knocks out Alomomola. I think that's like...
It's a lot, though, if it's special defense of Aloe.
Yeah, it's a lot. I have a team with it, if I can find my team builder really quick. There we go.
I think it was like 130 something if it's split up Alomola.
Yeah, it's 148. It's just like to be on the safe side. That I believe that accounts for Protect as well. So... I mean, that's taking a lot of your physical power away, but being able to knock out Alomomola on a predicted switch in, like, that's really huge for most teams. Yes, it can switch out, obviously, but you're at least making sure it can't, like, use Wish on you or something like that.
Yeah, and pass, and that's one of the main things that Glalie, like, a Wish pass to Registeel just walls, uses Toxic, goes right back and forth to Alomola, and just repeats the process on Glalie. But yeah, if that Pokemon goes down, I think that this Mon will go up a bit more. It also has a super strong explosion, sort of like a kamikaze type move, Refrigerate boosted, and on top of that, he mentioned Spikes as well, which I think will go up a lot.
I mean, Spikes right now on it's really good simply because it pressures the main sources of hazard removal in the tier. Because Flygon, like you're switching Flygon into Glalie.
You're beating Flygon. Yeah, but if you do run Spikes, I would say run Freeze Dry because that does allow you to mash Blastoise.
Yeah, personally, I would always run Freeze Dry anyway, simply because it pressures bulky water types. And
Slowking, Blastoise, Alomola,
Jellicent even
as well. Yeah, it's a good mon. Its stab is obviously walled by Reggie. I think Reggie is one of like the best checks to it in the tier.
Registeel, Bronzong.
Yeah, Bronzong definitely.
Pretty much any defensive steel type out there is going to take on Mega Glalie pretty well. Like the Protect Leftover set for Escavalier that's more so used for pursuit support. It's a pretty good offensive check to Mega Glalie as well, simply because it can sustain itself a little bit better than most other offensive steel types.
Yeah. He mentioned Ice Shard, which I think it also has a lot of use on it for picking off weakened Hitmonlees, maybe even unburdened Hitmonlees, not risking the speed tie with Flygon, picking off a weakened Virizion. And obviously, I think max speed is necessary on this Pokemon because you want to be able to outspeed Drapion. You want to be able to be faster than Venusaur. Though you could do Venusaur with the neutral max speed, you want to be faster than a Pokemon like Drapion as well in the tier.
Yeah. Another thing to note, and this is kind of one of the bad points on Mega Glalie. Yes, it does have bad points, even though we've been talking very highly about it. But it only has base 80 speed before Mega Evolving. And remember, again, for those who maybe who are maybe new to competitive Pokemon, basically the speed that Mega Glalie has, base 100, it won't take effect until the turn after it Mega Evolves. So if you try like Mega Evolving up against a Hitmonlee, you're just going straight down to a reckless high jump kick. So don't try that. But that's another reason you want to run max speed, so you can get the Mega off on as many Pokemon as possible.
Yeah, typically Glalie will be Mega-ing versus Pokemon that it outright forces out, though. Like, I'd Mega versus maybe a weakened Electros, or even versus Flygon or things like that on a free switch or a U-turn or a Volt switch at that.
Yeah, or even like against Flygon, like you're using Ice Shard anyway against it, so exactly. It's just a free chance to get a Mega. It's not going to want to stay in to take that more often than not.
Exactly. It's a cool mon. Spikes is really cool on it. I actually think this Pokemon will get a lot better if Alomola does get banned. Not that I'm for the ban, but
yeah, and keep in mind, like even though like we're talking about it would get better if Alomola goes.
It's not terrible now.
It's not like it's bad now. It's probably the easiest Mega to use in the tier because I feel like Mega Camerupt needs a little bit more support, even though it's really good. I feel like it just needs more support to function because it just doesn't have really good speed, so you have to account for its type weaknesses more. Whereas with Mega Glalie, it's weak to a lot of types because Ice is really bad defensively, but at the same time, you're using it for offense, not for maybe tanking a hit here and there while still wall breaking.
Yeah, the one thing I actually like about RU doesn't have to do too much with this, but I did want to mention is that RU is a tier where you don't have to actually have a Mega on your team. Like I feel RU is the tier, like if you don't want to deal with Megas, RU is probably what you end up playing. Just because Camel, Bayonet, and Glalie, they're not like ridiculously common on every other team. Whereas if you go to OU, you'll see Mega Scizor and things like that. Or NU, you'll see Dino. Yeah, Mega Dino. Even though it's like the only Mega in the tier, it's still you'll see it.
Yeah, and then UU obviously has Mega Arrow, Mega Beedrill.
Yeah, exactly.
Those powerhouses. But I guess the last thing I want to touch on with Mega Glalie is just the simple fact that, I just can't stress enough how good it is with spikes, simply because it just pressures the hazard removal in the tier, and even if you're worried about less common ways of removing entry hazards, like Hitmontop, for example, you can just throw on an explosion and just kind of block Rapid Spin that way, if you're worried about that in particular.
Yeah, exactly. Just a cool spiker and just a hard hitter in general. The next Pokemon is actually Golbat, and I believe it's Golbat, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, you're right.
But Golbat is it's a defogger in the tier. It's definitely a cool defogger if you want to use it over Flygon. It also has access to Taunt and moves like Super Fang and Roost, so has reliable recovery. It has ways of breaking through Pokemon. You can also run Brave Bird as well because that allows you to 100% take on Hitmonlee no matter what.
Yeah.
And I think one of the main things that Golbat has going for it is it's a defogger that cannot be poisoned. Typically, fatter teams, if they're not burning you with Scald, one of their main ways of beating you is wearing you down with poison. Registeel, only thing you can do to Golbat is Thunder Wave and hope for it to get parried like 4 times in a row as the Seismic tosses you down.
Yeah.
It's so bulky with an Eviolite as well.
You mentioned Super Fang. I do want to go back to Mega Glalie for 1 second, but that is a way to wear down Registeel and Bronzong with it. I forgot to mention that. But going back to Golbat, it's definitely one of those Pokemon where it's interesting. Like, its typing, even though it's maybe not the best for a defogger, it's still not bad within the tier because you can check fighting types. Another thing it does really well is check Venusaur. Like, pretty much any Venusaur variant you're going to check, like, even if it puts you to sleep, like what is it doing to you?
Yeah, even if it
Like,
knocks you off, it's not touching you if it's stabbed.
yeah. It also has Infiltrator, which is great ability. It keeps it from being set upon by Bulk Up Braviary, which is really crucial for a defogger. That's one of Flygon's biggest weaknesses, is that it oftentimes, when it's running a defog set, it won't be able to touch Braviary. You can Toxic it through sub, so that's really, really cool. Like, even if it comes in on your defog and you notice leftovers, like, okay, this is probably sub Bulk Up, I have Toxic, I'm just going to hit you through a sub.
Yeah.
So that's really nice for it. But one of the biggest problems I feel like it has is just it's really easy to counter pressure. And what I mean by that is you can kind of induce it switching in. Like if you set up rocks, it's probably going to want to come in and defog on something that you have out right now. Like say you have a Venusaur out and you've already gotten rocks up earlier in the match. It's very, very easy to know that Golbat's probably going to come in, try to defog, and you can just predict that with a switch into something like, say, Magneton or Mega Glalie, or something that just pressures it and is forced back out again.
Correct. It's definitely one of those Pokemon that it's forced to take hits. It's a defogger, it's weak to rock, so again, it's easy to be pressured. I also feel like it's one of those mons that kind of has the 4-move slot syndrome, where it wants more than 4 moves. If I use Golbat, I want Taunt, I want Brave Bird, I want Super Fang, I want Defog, and I want Roost, all on the same set. I might even want U-Turn just to get some sort of utility, even more utility going. But you're forced to go 4 moves, and typically if you use Golbat, you're using Defog and Roost. Those are 2 sets already just gone.
Yeah, like for me, Golbat, but Golbat usually, like you said, defog, Roost, it wants Brave Bird, it wants Taunt, it wants Super Fang, it wants Toxic, some even want U-Turn. That's about, what, 7 moves I think I just named off?
Something like 6 or 7.
But it's kind of the same issue as that Mega Bayonet has. Like, it's really hard to find a moveset that works for this thing, for your team. And much like Mega Bayonet, you're probably going to be waiting to fill out its moveset until the rest of your team is set. Because obviously Super Fang will help in wearing down bulky walls that you're doing next to nothing with otherwise. Toxic, again, really nice for the sub users, especially sub bulk up Braviary. That actually gives you a chance against it. Taunt obviously allows it to stall break with pretty decent speed, honestly. Base 90 is definitely pretty good for a defensive Pokemon.
Yeah, definitely.
But you just have all those moves and only 4 move slots to work with. You're going without 2 or 3 of those moves every time, and it wants all those moves, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. And you can run both physically defensive and especially defensive as well. Obviously, physically defensive lets you take on those fighting types better, but you're taking them on anyway because of your dual typing. Regardless.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you can go.
I honestly like physically defensive better, simply because, especially defensive, the main thing it's really helping you with is Venusaur, which, even if it knocks you off, as you said earlier, is not doing much of anything to you. Whereas some fighting types, especially Sock, like once it hits you with knockoff, it could just plow straight through you with Zen Headbutt, especially if you're not physically defensive.
Yeah, exactly. It also has some cool other options. It has Whirlwind, Haze. You could even use a Taunt, Super Fang, Roost, Brave Bird set if you want to go no defog. I think that's harder to pull off. I think what Golbat wants to do is defog, especially because you're running into Violite on it, so it's ridiculously bulky with that. Doesn't have the best HP, base 75, or the best defenses, but when you couple that with 1.5 times boost, when you raise that by 50%, it's pretty bulky in its own right. It's definitely I think the best answer to Hitmonlee in the tier.
Yeah, I definitely feel you on that. But I guess just to kind of close out with Golbat, you mentioned Taunt Super Fang. I actually used to run that a while back when Scrafty was a much more relevant threat, because that just outright beats the Dragon Dance Scrafty set. And I guess if your team is really weak to Dragon Dance Scrafty, you can still run that, but it's just Golbat's just one of those Pokemon that, it's not exactly bad per se, but it's just really hard to run in the tier right now because of how it's constructed.
Yeah, definitely. Next up we have Granbull. another cool Pokemon in the tier. I feel like it has a lot of competition from Diancie as a heal beller, but it obviously has some perks over it, being Intimidate, being Thunder Wave, and obviously mainly just that going for it. It can also hit the Steel types pretty hard with Earthquake, Fire Punch even if it wants to, and also Play Rough. Just this allows you. This pretty much can take on most physical attackers in the tier, like Hitmonlee, like Virizion. You couple this with Wish support, it's taking them on. Obviously, it's not going to be taking on hits from Escavalier. But being Fairy type, it also does resist fighting, which is why it's one of those mons that can just take them on. Couple it with a Wish Passer, and it's definitely annoying the breakthrough.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite Pokemon to run right now, actually, simply because it is, in my opinion, the best pure Fairy type in the tier. Like, obviously you have Diancie, but I don't consider that outright a Fairy type simply because it does not resist fighting. But one of the things I love about Granbull right now, the defensive set, you mentioned it, like Heal Bell, Thunder Wave, that's great utility. I actually run Fire Punch on it these days simply because that just destroys Escavalier, which is usually a very common switch in. And with a little bit of speed, you will always outspeed Escavalier. I think you need like 56 speed EVs to make sure you outspeed like random max speed Escavaliers. Like, I don't know how common that is, but it's just nice safety tool, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Fire Punch just destroys that. It pressures Venusaur, it pressures Bronzong. It does something with Registeel at least, to where it's not getting an absolutely free switch in on you.
You'll break a sub if Registeel runs
it. Yeah. One of the sets I actually have been playtesting a bit with lately, and I believe I've mentioned it to you a couple of times.
Pixie Plate?
Yeah, Pixie Plate offensive tank set that still runs like max defense EVs, but instead of just going max HP, I have like 136 attack, which is basically just what I have left over, honestly, after I do the rest of the EVs. And I still run Heal Bell on it, so it's more of an offensive cleric, which is something the tier sorely lacks right now. Like, there's not many outright offensive clerics in the tier right now at all. But basically, it's like Heal Bell, Play Rough, Fire Punch, and Earthquake.
Okay.
And with enough speed, obviously, still to outspeed Escavalier, and you also outspeed Mega Camrupt, and Play Rough into Earthquake knocks it out completely. Like, no questions asked. So
is Adamant or Impish?
Adamant.
Okay.
It has to be Adamant just because you kind of need the power for your coverage moves.
I mean, it does have base 120 attack, so it doesn't have a bad attack stat at all. But yeah, it makes sense.
And that's just kind of lets you get the support with Heal Bell and still have a lot of offensive firepower to work with. Obviously, Choice Band, if you're wanting just straight more pure offense, the Choice Band definitely works really well. It's going to be hitting really, really hard.
Yeah, I'd even use Thunder Wave on an offensive set, just because with Thunder Wave, if you Thunder Wave Venusaur, if you switch out and then come in later and Fire Punch on the Venusaur switching, you'll 2KO an offensive Venusaur easily.
Oh yeah,
if you're offensive.
Like Earthquake is pretty expendable. Like I kind of play around with Earthquake, Thunder Wave all the time. I feel like you need Heal Bell, Play Rough, Fire Punch on any non-banned Granbull set, simply because those are just great moves on it. But that last move slot, obviously, just going pure defensive, you'll want Thunder Wave or even Roar. Whereas the offensive, the Pixie Plate set I'm mentioning, you can go Earthquake, you can go Thunder Wave, you can go even Close Combat if you really want to. But I don't feel Close Combat does much for it.
Yeah, and again, the main thing about Granbull, if you want to use a Fairy type Cleric over Diancie, Granbull is the Pokemon for you, though obviously it doesn't do the same as Diancie because it doesn't check birds the same. It does have Intimidate, it can Thunder Wave, but Fletch can just burn you and set up on you anyway, set up on your, pretty much on your coverage regardless. But typically you pair Granbull, if it is a more support set, you pair it with something like Alomola to Wish Pass around, and just to be the Cleric right there.
You can run Rock Slide. It does have access to that, by the way. But
it probably does. It was a normal type before it became a Fairy type,
yeah.
So it has like it has a ton of moves in its arsenal.
Oh yeah, but I just can't stress enough like how important the pure Fairy typing is. Like that is what gives it such a huge niche over Deancey, because typically when you run Deancey, your team is going to be weak to fighting types unless you can fit like defensive Venusaur in or something like that. But Granbull kind of fixes that problem, and as long as you have like a Wish user, it's going to sustain itself pretty well.
Yeah, definitely agreed. It's a cool mon. I love just the design of it as well. And it's just one of those pure fairies that can just check fighting types, and you actually like it more than Aromatisse. And we already discussed Aromatisse in an earlier episode, but just a quick
like this is one of the big reasons I don't like Aromatisse, because Granbull can sustain itself more. It's not pressured as badly because it's not trying to keep itself and its team healthy. It's just
pretty much.
It's just trying to like make sure you stay clear of status. It can spread Thunder Wave, which is best move of the game, and it can even pressure Venusaur, which is huge for a fairy type. Like most other fairy types, Venusaur is coming in without like a second thought.
Yeah.
Whereas Granbull, it has Thunder Wave, it has Fire Punch. It's got to think twice. Like it can obviously switch into your stab still very easily, but you at least give it a couple of things to think about as it's coming in. Like, is it going to predict me and hit me with Thunder Wave or Fire Punch, or am I actually safe?
Exactly. So Granbull, one of those mons that can actually pressure the Pokemon that will commonly switch into fairy types. We have a great Pokemon next.
You're going to take this one, buddy.
We have Hitmonlee, guys. I love Hitmonlee. Its reckless high jump kick is ridiculously strong, doing probably close to 40% to fairies almost. It's a physically defensive Aromatisse. It's probably doing close to 40%. Around there. It has access to Knockoff. It even has access to Poison Jab. And then it has priority moves in Mach Punch and Sucker Punch. It's one of those Pokemon that even the most physically defensive Pokemon in the tier, like Alomola, fears switching in because it will be 2 KO'd by a jump kick. Pokemon like Venusaur don't like losing their items. And the Life Orb set just hits super hard. It also has access to Rapid Spin. And there's also the Scarf set with Close Combat, High Jump Kick, which can be a really reliable late game cleaner, especially because its speed actually puts it above Pokemon like Scarf Medicham.
Scarf Rotom Cut as well.
Exactly. It has 300 speed, so and base 120 attack. And it even has good Spadef as well, so you can even switch in on those weaker special attacks in the tier. But it's just a Pokemon that hits hella hard. And typically the way you beat it is because you take advantage of its defenses, or the fact that it kills itself by missing high jump kick or just life or recall in general. Typically that's how you beat it, and then you pick it off with just either weak or priority moves. I mentioned how Mega Glalie can pick this thing off if it's at about like 40%, and it wears itself down by hitting Alomola and then protecting. And things like that. So it actually ends up wearing itself down. But just a great offensive fighting type in the tier.
Yeah, I love Hitmonlee. It's definitely one of the best Pokemon in the tier. And as you mentioned, even physically defensive Pokemon usually don't like switching into this. Like, you need a resistance and good physical bulk to take this thing on. Because offensive Venusaur is just straight up 2-hit KO'd by high jump kick.
Yep,
like,
and outside.
Straight up. Yep. And honestly, the Life Orb set, I like running both Sucker Punch and Mach Punch on it. That way, Fletchinder can't just come in and you can click Acrobatics.
Yeah, Fletchinder can't even switch into this thing. It's taking like
10 million from high jump kick, and if you have Sucker Punch, well, it's gone.
Yeah, I actually don't like using, like, just to go off that, sorry to cut you off. I actually don't like using Rapid Spin on Hitmonlee if it's Life Orb or Scarf. Well, maybe Scarf can run it, because Scarf typically I find myself running high jump kick, close combat, and knockoff, and then a filler last move. I don't usually put Poison Jab there just because it doesn't do enough without a Life Orb boost.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I typically run. I don't like to run Rapid Spin on Hitmonlee. It's a great Rapid Spinner because it outspeeds the ghost types in the tier and can knock them off and kill some of them, like Hoopa, for example, and 2-hit KO Jellicent, but upon switching with a Life Orb. But I don't like Rapid Spin because typically you're taking 10% for no damage. Yeah, you're getting rid of you're taking hazards upon coming in, but then you're also taking the extra 10% from Life Orb, where you could just be spamming high jump kick and 2-hit KO or something.
Or knockoff and getting rid of items.
Exactly.
I feel like with Hitmonlee, whenever I see a ghost type, I'm not as deterred by it as I would be with Medicham, because I know I can just click knockoff and I'm still getting something out of the turn.
Exactly.
Like, even if they don't switch that ghost type in, whatever they switch in loses an item. Like with Medicham, clicking Zen Headbutt is always a risk because A, can miss, and B, it obviously has resistances and immunities. But at least with Hitmonlee, your secondary move, you're still getting something out of the turn even if you can't spam high jump kick.
Exactly.
Which I feel like is a huge advantage over Medicham. But like you were talking about, like Rapid Spin, I would only use on a Scarf set because I have the room to run it, and I would view it more as like emergency removal against like Spike Stack teams. Kind of like with Defog on Scarf Flygon, like I'm really only going to use that if I'm up against Spike Stack. Because otherwise, I've probably built the team to be able to deal with Stealth Rock, to be able to deal with Toxic Spikes, so I'm not too worried about those. Whereas, obviously, any team without Hazard removal is going to be weak to Spike Stack in some way. So it's nice emergency removal, but the Life Orb set, I just want like high jump kick, knockoff, and dual priority, honestly.
Exactly.
Like yeah, Poison Jab is nice, but I just like Sucker Punch so much more because then you can deal with Meloetta, you can deal with Scarf Hoopa, you can deal with Fletchender. It just allows you to deal with a lot more offensive threats.
Yeah. It's a strong Pokemon. It picks
up.
Yeah.
Also, definitely run Jolly on this thing. That way you always outspeed Venusaur because you 2-hit KO it, obviously, with Life Orb, high jump kick.
Yeah, if it's offensive,
and that doesn't change with Jolly. You still get that 2-hit KO, and you ensure you outspeed it. So, just kind of a note, like for the Life Orb set, obviously Scarf, you want to run Jolly anyway, so you can outspeed everything you can. And I believe we even used that set in Alive about a month and a half ago, and showed how good it can be.
Yeah, exactly, because on Scarf you can run high jump kick and close combat. You use high jump kick when you need to pick off a kill, but close combat is just so spammable as well, and it's still strong. Obviously it's not boosted by Reckless, and obviously it's not 130 base power to start, but it is a powerful attack coming off of a powerful base 120 attack Mon. So even with neutral, it's still 339 attack coming through. So it's something that you could definitely spam late game if you don't want to miss high jump.
Yeah, and I know a lot of you are probably going to wonder, well, why use Scarf Hitmonlee when I can use Scarf Medicham in the tier? And the easy answer for that is, again, close combat. It gives you a reliable cleaning move that you don't have to worry about missing. Like, Medicham is still probably the best Scarfer in the tier, and it just goes to show like how much power it has, because it doesn't have that reliable move to clean with, unless you count like Drain Punch or Thunder Punch or something like that. But there's always the threat of it just missing and dying.
Yeah.
On the spot.
Also, I just wanted to note that Hitmonlee is faster than a Selgor with the Choice Scarf, whereas Medicham is outsped, and with a little bit of prior, and with a little bit of prior damage can be knocked out by a Life or Bug Buzz, which is why also I think you should be running max speed on your Selgors. But we talked about that earlier. But yeah. Scarf Hitmonlee and Life Orb Hitmonlee, ridiculously strong Pokemon. If you're not going for high jump kicks, you're going for knockoffs. And what knockoff is doing is it's creating opportunities for the counters to not be counters. It's kind of like how Exploud, if it goes for Boom Burst once and you switch in a Scavalier is no longer a counter to that thing, because now it's being 2-hit KO'd if it switches in again. So it's sort of like that. You knock off Venusaur's Black Sludge, you knock off Alamola's Leftovers, even Granbull's.
Golbat.
Golbat as well.
Golbat, Violite, Aromatisse Leftovers. And knocking off Aromatisse Leftovers, we talked about it obviously in depth when we talked about Aromatisse in part 1, but knocking off that thing's Leftovers, absolutely huge, because then you just pressure it super hard.
Exactly.
Like with virtually anything that can hit it.
Aromatisse already struggles too, because it wants to knock. Doesn't want to heal itself, it doesn't want to heal its opponent, or its teammate. But I think that's enough about Hitmonlee. Great Mon. Yep. I've even ran Choice Band and everything just dropped. Like everything should have dropped.
Yeah, if you want straight up power, you can go for Choice Band, but I do like Life Orb a lot more, just so you can switch moves.
Next up, we have another evolution of Tyrogue, Hitmontop, and you can take it away, buddy.
Alright, Hitmontop is another source of hazard removal. Obviously, we went over Golbat earlier. Hitmonlee, obviously more emergency removal. But Hitmontop is more defensive route, obviously, for Tyrogue, and it does have Intimidate, which is really nice. Much like Granbull, lets it soften up physical attacks. The problem for Hitmontop is it just doesn't have as good of a typing as Granbull to take physical attacks, but it still can, like in emergency situations.
It has terrible base HP.
Yeah, HP is awful. Like base 50 is just like nothing good for a defensive Pokemon at all.
Yeah.
I feel like this thing was a lot better when Mega Steelix and Tyrantrum were in the tier.
Because you checked them, yeah. Because you actually have a use, yeah.
Yeah, and now, like with and especially now with Blastoise in the tier, this thing's just took a huge hit in viability because a lot of people, when they want a bulky Rapid Spinner now, just go ahead and use Blastoise.
It's fresh and Scald, yep.
Yeah, like the only time you're really going to use Hitmontop is, say you like already have a Slowking or a Momola or a Jellicent or something like that on your team, and you obviously don't want to stack weaknesses with Blastoise or something like that. Then you'll probably use Hitmontop, but even then, you still have support Flygon.
Yeah, I also feel like you use Hitmontop if you really want a Rapid Spin versus Ghosts. This is actually the only Rapid Spinner that I will run Foresight on. But even then, like, you don't want to stand versus the Ghost either. You do have access to Sucker Punch for Hoopa, but then Spiritomb is burning you. Jellicent is burning you. Yeah, you can close combat Spiritomb down after using Foresight, but it's just... I feel like it's just a Rapid Spinner. It's like probably the one of the worst hazard removers in the tier. Like Blastoise beats it, Flygon beats it. Obviously, we're hazard removal. Even Golbat, I think, has better utility than Hitmontop because it just has access to reliable recovery. And Blastoise obviously has Scald and Refresh going for it. So
yeah, and Flygon obviously has Roost that blocks Volt Switch, so and as well U-turn as well.
Yeah.
To get your attackers in more reliably. Something I will say on Hitmontop, and it's kind of another knock on it, and I hate to like kind of talk down on it, but it's just not nearly as good as it was a couple of months ago. But that's the fact that it just doesn't have a good fighting type move for a defensive fighting type. Like if this thing had Drain Punch, it would at least have some sort of recovery.
I mean, it has low kick, high jump kick, and close combat. But again, what he's like. Just to elaborate on that, like you're lowering your defenses by using close combat. High jump kick can miss, and you'll take 50% of your health. Yeah, and then low kick isn't always the strongest move versus Pokemon like maybe like Bronzong. I think top of my head, I think Bronzong doesn't take anything from low kick. I might be wrong.
It'll take a good bit from low kick, but I think it's around the same power as close combat. And that's the thing. Like low kick, even at max power, is the same base power as close combat. So you're kind of stuck in that situation where high jump kick misses. You also can't use it, period, if there's a ghost type on the opposing team. Yeah, you have Foresight, but you're using that mainly to spin, and
it's less versus Bronze. It's 100 base power.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's still got good base power, but again, close combat's stronger, and lowering your defenses as a defensive Pokemon, that's just very counterproductive. It's just not good at all. Like, again, not really good.
It was better when Mega Steelix and Tyrantrum were in the tier because it was an offense. It can be an offensive check to them as well. Close combat, Mach Punch. Now I just find myself running close combat, Toxic, Rapid Spin, and either Sucker Punch or Mach Punch. I actually like Sucker Punch better, just so I can actually do something to Hoopa that's not running sub and like knock them out.
Absolutely. I guess the last thing I'll touch on with Hitmontop is the fact I do see Assault Vest a lot. Don't run that, simply because then you're forced to run all attacking moves, and Hitmontop, at the very least, needs either Foresight or Toxic to deal with Ghosts.
Yeah.
Either Foresight to immediately be able to spin, or Toxic to be able to at least wear them down.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously you can't run either of those with Assault Vest because you can't run status category moves.
Yeah. I'm actually hoping the Hitmontop drops down to NU. Because I think it would be just such a great spinner in the NU tier. But we're obviously not talking about that.
Yeah,
that's just something I wanted to...
Yeah, but I agree with you on that. Like, I feel like Hitmontop is just... It's one of those Pokemon that's kind of clinging to RU.
I feel like it was like Hitmonchan almost, but better.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it at least had some sort of defensive utility before Tyrantrum left. It was honestly one of the better checks for that because you have Intimidate, Resistance to Rock, so you could take Head Smash like a lot longer than most other defensive Pokemon outside of like Mega Steelix.
Yeah.
But with those two gone, it's kind of lost a lot of its viability.
Yeah, definitely. Next up on the list, and again, you can start it off. Hoopa.
Ooh boy! So Hoopa, the Pokemon everybody thought would be absolutely just insanely broken when it first dropped to RU a few months ago, with an insane 150 special attack set, highest in the tier, even higher than Mega Camerupt, just to give you an idea. Things that really hold it back, and I'll just get this out of the way quick before I talk about its strong points. Obviously, it's quad weak to dark. Pursuit is pretty common in the tier. Stuff like Aerodactyl, Escavalier,
Drapion, a Houndoom.
Yep. And although Houndoom doesn't run it a lot, it's still something you have to like at least be wary of. But yeah, it's.
I mean, if
Pursuit,
the Houndoom team is weak to Meloetta or Hoopa, I think they'll run it. But
yeah. But yeah, Pursuit's just pretty common in the tier. A lot of pretty much anything that isn't straight up offense is going to probably have a Pursuit user of some kind on it. That way, they just don't drop immediately to Hoopa. And then the base 70 speed, it's not bad per se, but being behind stuff like Metagem, Hitmonlee, Venusaur, not exactly desirable because you don't want to be taking hits from them, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, though it does have great special defense, so it can take on hits from Venusaur. If Venusaur runs knockoff, it drops. So
yeah. Or if it runs Sleep Powder, it's putting you out of commission before you can hit it. But bad things aside, Hoopa is a very powerful wall breaker that you definitely want to just be sure you have an answer for because it hits hella hard. Basically, I typically run Shadow Ball, Hyperspace Hole, Focus Blast, Knock on it if I'm going like full on Life Orb attacker.
You like Hyperspace Hole over Psyshock?
Yeah, simply because that busts through subs, it busts through protect, it makes sure that I don't have to deal with Alamomola trying to wish support the opposing team. Obviously, I'll scout for knockoff first when I'm going that route because knockoff I'll just drop again. But I just like it more simply because I don't have to worry about Aromatisse or Alamomola trying to wish stall me or anything like that. I'm just 2-hit KOing them, like straight up. They can't do anything about it. If there's like a slower sub user, like maybe Braviary, and it's low enough on health, I can knock it out through sub. It's just, I feel like it's just a really nice option. Obviously, Psyshock definitely has its own merits as well. I'm not gonna like sit here and say you have to run Hyperspace. It's just something I prefer to use. But another set you can run is obviously it has base 70 speed, which is just enough to run Choice Scarf, which allows you to get past stuff like Venusaur, non-Scarf Metagam. Allows you to just perform better against offensive teams in general.
And also because it does have that low speed, not necessarily low, not necessarily high, you could run a Trick Room Hoopa set. You pair that with like Mega Camel, Bronzong, things like that to take it on. So that's definitely something as well that can take the hits. I do want to say that even though it is a ghost type, you're not really using it as a spin blocker unless it's a Pokemon like Blastoise, which hits you on the special side and special side only. Because then you can tank hits from Blastoise until it KO them with Shadow Ball. But outside of that, don't come in on Hitmonlee. It's faster and it kills you with knockoff. Just because you can block their action, don't do that. Hitmonlee's probably going for knockoff first anyway.
Yeah, and even like if you're Scarf, like I wouldn't even come in on
exactly.
if it's Life Orb because it could just Sucker Punch and kill you.
Exactly.
But I guess let's see. There was with that, but one thing with Hoopa that I will mention is the fact that it just like I said, it hits hella hard. You need a resistance to this, obviously, to live its hits most of the time. But just the fact that it's quad weak to dark.
And its speed, just like that's really what's holding it back.
Yeah, like that's what keeps it from being just insanely broken in the tier. But a couple other sets I do want to make mention of. Sub 3 attacks allows you to avoid Pursuit, allows you to avoid Sucker Punch, and still hit decently hard. And Sub Nasty Plot, which is basically you giving the middle finger to stall in any way possible.
Pretty much.
Because they can't Pursuit you, they can't like Sucker Punch you, they can't status you, and you're just destroying them.
Yeah, exactly. And like Stall again they have weak attacks. Like Alomola Scald is definitely not breaking your sub at all, and you just nasty plot up on that and just smack through them. So definitely something. And it also has the speed to be able to outspeed defensive Venusaur on Stall. It's not taking seismic tosses from Registeel, guys. That's pretty important because one of the only attacks. One of the only attacks that Registeel typically runs. If it's not running like something like Ironhead, which I think even is rare, it would be Seismic Toss, because they usually run Seismic Toss, Status Move, Stealth Rock, maybe another Status Move, or Protect. Like Registeel's the type of mon that can afford to run 2 Status Moves, or Rest. Is also something I've seen and use myself.
And I guess on Stall it could be Curse Registeel, which then obviously
runs Ironhead,
yeah, but otherwise you're pretty much just setting up on that. And really, those are the only 2 other sets outside of the first 2 I mentioned that you should really consider running on Hoopa, because Substitute, obviously, it allows you to try to circumvent the Sucker Punch weakness, the Pursuit weakness, the Speed weakness. It's just kind of different ways to circumvent that I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, definitely. It lets you make your play after you've done it, as opposed to going for an attack that's not very effective on, let's say, a Drapion coming in, and then just being killed by Pursuit.
Yeah, or as Cavalier, which you're not going to be able to knock out whatever you do.
Yeah.
So, like, it just gives you a free out. Like.
Yeah, exactly. You can switch. Yeah.
Like you sub, the opponent brings in as Cavalier. Okay, I need to switch out immediately because Pursuit will hit my sub. Instead of going straight down, I just lose 25% of my health. I can maybe after the rest of the team wears it down some, I can come back in later.
Exactly. So sub definitely gives it that safety, that check. Speaking of Pursuit Trappers, Houndoom is actually next, and I love Houndoom. I actually used it a lot when I was playing in SPL, or at least once. And I love the fact that I love its speed, 317, and its dual stab is actually pretty solid as well. Fire moves as well as access to Sucker Punch, Pursuit. I actually did use Pursuit mainly because my team was weak to Meloetta, and
yeah, that's fair.
At the time, and it definitely helped me out. And then it also has access to moves like Nasty Plot as well. Typically, when I use it, I run Life Orb, and Fire Blast allows me to get through the likes of Pokemon like Venusaur. There's also a few niche moves that I ran, like Will-O-Wisp as well as Toxic. I've also ran Destiny Bond on this Pokemon just because it's so fragile that it will die if something attacks it. It will die. It will normally die. But
it's straight up offensive Pokemon. You're not going to be using this to tank hits unless it's like from Delphox. That's like the only offensive
That's like
Pokemon
the only one you could switch into, yeah.
Yeah, at least the only offensive Pokemon you can switch into. But Houndoom is just one of those Pokemon where it's good, but it has its answers. And I feel like one of the biggest issues it has is obviously DNC.
Yeah.
Like, you have to run Hidden Power Steel and be at +2 to
knock it out, yeah.
Yeah, be able to beat DNC. Otherwise, it's just killing you with Diamond Storm no matter what you do.
Blast is doing like 70.
Yeah, yeah. So after Stealth Rock and Life Orb hit, you're still pretty much going down to that.
Exactly.
But one of the another one of the niche moves that Houndoom has is Flame Charge. And Nasty Plot Flame Charge just outright can destroy like offensive teams. Flame Charge in general, because then you get +1 speed with Life Orb boost. Not a lot of offensive Pokemon are going to want to take hits from that thing. But overall, like, Houndoom is a solid Pokemon, but not without its very reliable answers.
Exactly. The ability I would run on it, though it does have access to Early Bird, is always Flash Fire, because that makes it a 100% answer to Delphox's dual stab. Whereas if you run Early Bird, Specs Delphox, it might actually 2KO you. So with Fire Blast. And typically, as we said, you don't switch in Houndoom too much, unless it's like Delphox, unless you know it's Meloetta locked into Psychic. So you just Flash Fire. You don't really need Early Bird. Even like Venusaur, you're not switching into Venusaur because Sludge Bomb's going to do a lot to you. So even though
Storm's going to be doing a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely obviously run Flash Fire. I would always just go like almost pure special. Like like you said, the only time I would really run Pursuit is if maybe I'm super weak to Hoopa or super weak to Meloetta. I guess another offensive Pokemon Houndoom can switch into is Sigilyph,
Yes,
and
yes.
that is pretty crucial because Sigilyph is really an awkward Pokemon to switch into. Like I've noticed more and more as I've been building lately that most of my teams do not have a switch into that thing. But
Even then, you have to be careful. If it's Sash Sigilyph, it just 2KOs you with Air Slash anyway. So
yeah, or it cripples you with Thunder Wave.
exactly.
So, like,
Again, that's another Pokemon that I played when I was during SPL, and I think the only time I ever switched it in was when I knew that he was going for Psychic, or I sacked something to bring it in. And what I did was I pursued it first, and then I Sucker Punched to kill it.
right.
Because it's not always going to switch either. Like if you're bringing in Houndoom, they might think, "Oh man, Pursue," but I would always run Sucker Punch on a set if it's not Nasty Plot. Even Nasty Plot, if you're not running HP Steel, I would run Sucker Punch as well.
Oh,
if
yeah.
you're just running Dual Stab, Dark Pulse, Sucker Punch, Nasty Plot, and Fire Move. Mainly because it's just such great to pick off weaker mons. It can pick off Fletchling, a Fletchinder, excuse me. I keep mixing up the tier, man. Next time I'm gonna start calling it Talonflame.
You just love Fletchling, man. What's up with that?
Because I love it in Little Cup, it's so fun. But it also helps you pick off Pokemon like a weakened Jolteon, which definitely outspeeds you and threatens you with the Thunderbolt. Scarf Meloetta, even it's just good utility. Yeah, Scarf Metacham as well. So
Yeah, like basically Sucker Punch gives Nasty Plot set utility. And like I agree with you. Like if you're not running Hidden Power Steel, like the only other two moves I would consider running are Sucker Punch and Hidden Power Grass if you just want to get through Rhyperior, because that will tank a Dark Pulse and knock you out. If it's like the special defensive tank set, so you can obviously like run Hidden Power Grass if your team is weak to that, or maybe you have an offensive Pokemon that just wants that thing gone. But yeah, like those are really the three moves I would consider in the last move slot with Nasty Plot. I guess the only other set I would I'll bring up is it's just the straight up pursuit set, and I honestly was instead of running like a high amount of physical attack investment, I would still run a high amount of special attack investment and use Dark Pulse over Crunch, simply because the physical. No. The physical set was just kind of like a relic from way back when Rheoneclipse was in the tier. That's how old it is. But just the fact that you don't really need Crunch anymore. Crunch was simply there to make sure you 2-hit KO'd Rheoneclipse, even if it Calm Mind up. But there's like no need for Crunch anymore, so just go Dark Pulse. I'd run more special attack investment, so your Fire Blasts are doing a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, it has 110 base special attack versus 90 attack anyway. So typically, you're going to want to hit hard.
Yeah, and like the only times you're using Sucker Punch and Pursuit is for the utility, which means the targets are already weakened anyway.
Exactly. And there's also one more set, which is more of a gimmick set that I've actually used to success, which was Focus Sash Lead with counter and like taunt. It was just like to cripple Pokemon like the Antsy and things like that, and just get rid of them right away. But again, typically you're just gonna be running a Life Orb set, whether it's Nasty Plot or Pursuit Trapping or Mixed. That's usually what Houndoom is gonna be doing. Next up is Jellicent, and you can take this one, bro.
Alright, so Jellicent, funny thing, I've actually been using it a little bit recently, and it's a pretty good Pokemon. A little bit overshadowed by Slowking, simply because their typings are relatively similar, and Slowking obviously has a bit more versatility than Jellicent does, but that doesn't make Jellicent a bad Pokemon at all. Like, if you run like 44 speed EVs and like Alomomola is called Toxic, then as long as you don't get hit with Toxic, you just straight up wall that thing.
Exactly.
Because you typically you're running Recover, Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, and then either Scald or Hex.
Yep.
Depending on which targets you need Jellicent to hit for your team. Like obviously, if you're weak to Mega Camera, you're gonna want Scald.
Yep.
If you don't have a reliable way of beating Slowking, you're gonna want to run Hex. Just things like that. Just kind of determine what stab move you run on this. But do not run both stab moves, because you need Recover, Taunt, Will-O-Wisp. Like, those are non-negotiable. You need those moves so Jellicent isn't like a worse Slowking or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
exactly. Taunt is the thing that just puts it above Slowking in general. Obviously, Slowking's taking special hits better than Jellicent, just because naturally bulky. But then again, Jellicent just has great special
Not by
hits
much,
anyway.
actually.
Yeah, yeah. But again, you want Taunt because you can beat Alomola with Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, and Hex in itself, even without Hex, because you do have Water Absorb. Alomola can't touch you unless it's running Knockoff, and if it's running Knockoff, it's not running Toxic, so you don't have to worry about it. And Taunt also stops that thing from just passing wishes. So, again, it's one of those mons that it's cool because it's a Ghost type, so it can switch into Fighting type moves, like Metachan's like Jump Kick. Obviously, it has to worry about Hitmonlee's knockoff, even potentially Thunder Punch if Metachan is happening to run that, which it can run because Slowking is in the tier, Blastoise is in the tier. I would run it.
Yeah. Most Metachan sets do run it,
Yeah,
like even if they're Scarf, because again, Slowking is one of the best switch checks to it.
Yep.
So being able to do a hell of a lot to that is really nice. Something I will mention with Jellicent, and we mentioned it with Blastoise, but obviously you can try to outspeed Blastoise to taunt it before it can get off Toxic or use Refresh.
That's a lot of speed, though. That's probably about like, close to 200.
Yeah, I was going to say, I will warn you, that will take a lot of your bulk away, so you have to kind of weigh whether it's worth it or not. Typically what I'll do, though, is I will run 96 speed on it, and that's enough for Adamant Max Speed Rhyperior, so I can just click Scald and kill that thing before it hit me with like a Choice Banded hit. And you still have enough physical bulk to take on most of what you need to. So I feel like that's a pretty good benchmark to go for in the current metagame with Jellicent if you're wanting to add some speed to it. Obviously, you can still just stick to the typical spread with just 44 speed. That way you can taunt Alomomola before it wishes, before it toxics, whatever.
Taunt Registeel before it does the same, pretty much just toxicking you. It's such a weird Pokemon though because it's a Ghost type and Water type that doesn't like switching in too much to the fighting types of the tier. You would think just because of its natural typing it would, but with Emboar it has to worry about Wild Charge. With Metacham, if it's not physically defensive, then Headbutt can 2 KO. And I would run special defensive in the tier where there's Pokemon like Camel running around.
Yeah, I feel like Jellicent spread kind of depends on your team, personally, because physically defensive can let it take on the fighting types better, and you can even run Colbur Berry.
Yeah, that'll definitely help. So you take the knock.
Yeah, to make it where their knockoffs don't do nearly as much to you. And then you can obviously run a bit more of a specially defensive set if stuff like Delphox, Mega Camrupt, those sorts of things are more of a bother to your team. So it is kind of flexible in its EV spread. I personally prefer physically defensive, but I mean, you can still use specially defensive. Just make sure you have another fighting type answer if you go specially defensive.
Yeah, I think Colbur Berry is actually one of its better items over Leftovers. Yeah, you lose that turn per turn, but you do have access to recover, as well as the fact this actually lets you check and burn Hitmonlee, a Pokemon that will just 2 KO you would knock off if you're not running it, regardless of your item. There's also I've also ran Spec Jellicent. Because it has base 60 speed, and I just like spamming Water Spout. It's not necessarily good, but it is something that I've used. To be able to outspeed like Modest, Exploud, and Smack 'em has Energy Ball, Shadow Ball.
Right. And I do want to touch on Water Absorb, but that is huge. That lets it switch into basically every bulky water in the tier aside from like opposing Jellicent's running Hex over Scald, because it gives you a Scald immunity, and that's really huge in a tier with Alomomola, Slowking, Seismitoad,
Blastoise,
opposing Jellicents. So don't underestimate that. Like, it can't check fighting types as well as you may want a Ghost type to check, but it gives you a Scald immunity, and that's really nice to have in this tier right now.
Exactly, 100% agreed. I think Curse Body is a cool move, but I think Water Absorb is just the ability to go for over it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just more consistent, more reliable.
Exactly.
It allows you to 100% beat Alomomola possibly without being crippled in any way.
Mm-hmm.
It also lets you it also lets you beat any Slowking that isn't using a boosting move of some kind, like Calm Mind or Nasty Plot, because even then you can just taunt them to make sure that they don't
taunt
have that.
Will-O-Wisp Hex, and you take it down like on its own. So, and definitely, if don't run Scald and Hex, because I mean Scald is one of the best moves, but I don't think if you're running Hex, unless you're running like T-Spikes on the team and you have like a reliable answer for Venusaur, you're getting rid of it, I wouldn't run both. I would definitely run Will-O-Wisp Hex or Will-O-Wisp Scald.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even though Scald, like you said, is one of the best moves in the game, like I said earlier, you kind of need to weigh which stab move you need, because Jellicent, you don't want to run both. Like, that just kind of takes away from what it wants to do. You generally just have to pick one or the other and make sure your team can handle the targets of the other move. Like, if you're running Hex, you need to make sure you have a Delphox. Well, actually Delphox is hit by Hex, but you need to make sure you have a Mega Camera up to answer, for sure.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're running Scald, you might want a quicker way to get rid of Slowking, because it's going to take a while to get through Slowking if you don't have Hex.
Definitely.
Like, you'll still eventually beat it, but it's going to take a while, especially because as Regenerator can just switch out.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's enough to cover about Jellicent. One more thing is it's actually a spin blocker that can do its job. Like, it can rapid spin, it can spin block versus blast. If you do run speed, you can obviously taunt it before it toxics you, or you can just not care and have a heal builder on your team and, you know, try and wear it down. Also, it switches in to Hitmontop. Obviously, Hitmontop has Foresight, but again, what is it doing after that? Like, you set up rocks again later, and you continue to do the same thing. You force Hitmontop to go for the Foresight whenever it comes in, or Toxic. And even then, if it Toxics, you can taunt it after so it can't Foresight. You can Will-O-Wisp, you can Hex it, you wear it down. But next Pokemon on the list is Jolteon. Actually, another one of the mons that I love to use in this tier. It has high base speed. It's faster than pretty much every non-boosted Pokemon outside of a Selgor in the tier. Speed tying with Aerodactyl. Why is it Jolly? Oh my god. Why is it Jolly on my screen?
Good job, buddy. Physical Jolteon, the best, right? 2016.
It has access to Volt Switch, Thunderbolt, Strong. You can run Specs, you can run HP Ice, even HP Water. I would definitely run HP Ice still, because I think Flagon is more so of a threat you want to deal with, as well as hitting Venusaur with an attack, whereas the other one would just hit Rhyperior harder, as well as Camerupt. But I definitely run HP Ice on it. Thunderbolt. And then your last one was usually up to you. I've actually ran Thunder Wave. I've even ran Sand Attack on it. Don't run Sand Attack on it, but I've ran Sand Attack on it during SPL, just in case I got into a situation versus a Sucker Punch user and I wanted to beat it. Access to Baton Pass, as well as I also used to use Signal Beam back in the day when Abomasnow was in the tier. But again, just such a great
Signal Beam is still nice, like for Meloetta, for hitting Venusaur neutrally in case you're not running Hidden Power Ice. You can at least do something with it.
It's one of those. It's one of the Specs users that can actually. It doesn't care that you have Alomola on your team or Registeel. Registeel is being almost 3-hit KO'd by Specs Thunderbolt. After a Spike, I think it's pretty much 3-hit KO'd. Depending on damage, and obviously it's smacking Alomola with the Specs Thunderbolt, and it does have the Hidden Power Ice to deal with Flagon. Obviously, be careful, because some Flagon can tank the hit if they're running enough bulk. But
and if they're running Scarf, they're obviously going to
faster
outspeed.
and smack it with Earthquake. Yeah.
So basically, if they switch into you, I would switch out the Scout for Scarf damage first before staying in the next time, because some will try to bluff the Scarf to get a free switch in, whereas others, they're actually Scarf and they're going to KO you.
Exactly.
So definitely just kind of scout for it. That way, not only do you figure out if it's Scarf or not, but if it isn't Scarf, you give the opponent the impression that I don't have Hidden Power Ice, I have like Hidden Power Water or Hidden Power Grass, I can't kill you. And then the next time it comes in, boom, it's gone. Exactly.
Typically, you pair Jolteon with. I would say Pokemon like Venusaur are greatly paired with Jolteon, because Venusaur. Or even Bronzong, they're Pokemon that can deal with Rhyperior, or even Flagon again. They're Pokemon that can deal with Rhyperior, Pokemon that can deal with Camerupt. Obviously not Bronzong or Venusaur, but Flagon in that set, or even a bulky Water. just giving you a switch in. And Jolteon is pretty frail on the physical defensive side. You typically don't want this thing to take hits, but it is also a soft check to a Pokemon like Fletchinder in the tier. And again, I say soft check because if it's Will-O-Wisp and then Fletchinder has got it to +2, Jolteon can be knocked off after rocks and burn damage, or knocked out by acrobatics after rocks and burn damage. So it's a soft check, meaning it's circumstantial whether or not it can take on the Mon. But its high speed is really what Jolteon has going for it. And then it actually has pretty decent special attack. 110 special attack is nothing to laugh at.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That's very, very serviceable in a tier. Like, it's definitely not something to sneeze at. Something that I mentioned with Granbull, no real good offensive clerics in the tier, but like you mentioned the fourth move on like a Life Orb set, sometimes being kind of just filler, because you kind of have what you need, like with Thunderbolt, Empower Ice,
and Volt Switch,
yeah. You can run you can run Baton Pass, you can run you could run Wish, even though it has really low base HP, and you can also run Heal Bell on it, which allows it to check Fletchinder even better, because then you don't have to worry about burn damage wearing you down. Though
if you are Life Orb, you're gonna wear yourself down anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still one of those things that you can consider. Like, I would honestly just go like either Volt Switch or Thunderbolt, and a Signal Beam, and hit Power Ice or Water or Grass, and then throw Heal Bell in at the end.
Yeah.
Another set I do want to bring up is a little bit more supportive, but Substitute Baton Pass, which was a lot more popular when Mega Steelix was in the tier, and offensive Jolteon was not quite as good because of that. It's still not bad, considering you can run Substitute, Baton Pass, Thunderbolt, obviously, to still beat what you're supposed to be.
Yeah, and then like hit Power Ice for Flagon or something, or even Water or Grass.
Yeah, or you can even run Wish again on that set, like Wish Baton Pass, to like straight pass into something. You have sub to protect the intended recipient, possibly, to make sure that they aren't like knocked out by some random attack that the opponent has, or maybe it's just super low on HP and wouldn't be able to switch in otherwise to get the Wish.
Yeah. You'll also be wondering, oh, why do you have Baton Pass if you're running Volt Switch? Well, typically, maybe if you don't want to predict, if you don't want to have to just hard switch and predict the Rhyperior coming in or the camera coming in, if you know that you can't touch them, Baton Pass just gives you that, whether they stay in or they switch out, it gives you the switch initiative. It gives you the advantage to that turn because you can safely switch into one of your checks to the Pokemon either on the field or the Pokemon coming out. Right there. And again, also Thunder Wave does have its uses. I do want to say that Volt Absorb is actually really cool on this because it's I think it's the only Pokemon in the tier outside of maybe Electros, obviously just because it's an Electro type, but that resists Magneton's dual stab. But then you don't always want to take an Analytic Specs boosted Flash Cannon. But keep in mind,
that's straight to KOing.
Yeah.
Don't even think twice about that.
But keep in mind though, your Specs Thunderbolt can 2 KO Magneton as well. Depending on damage. I'm pretty sure it's an easy 2 KO actually on Magneton. So.
Now, something I will mention with Jolteon, you've been mentioning specs. I actually like Life Orb a little bit more in this metagame, simply because Ductrio is just such a powerful force in this metagame right now. And obviously, if you're specs, you can't switch up to Empower Ice to save yourself. Like, if you go straight for Thunderbolt, like, say the opponent has, just for sake of argument, say they've got, like, some sort of just weakened attacker that's not going to be able to switch into anything else the rest of the game, and they're just stacking it to get a free switch. If you're specs, they go to Ductrio, then you're dead.
You're dead.
Like, you can't do anything. Whereas if you're Expert Belt or Life Orb, you can save yourself with Empower Ice.
Well, even then, you need a bit of chip damage on Ductrio anyway, because Ductrio actually has decent special defense, so it can take a Life Orb HP Ice. But if you get off a little bit of chip damage on Dougie, then it's dead. So.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that you kind of need to consider. Simply, like Empower Ice, like minimum is doing 97%. Like after Stealth Rock, it's gone.
Yeah.
Talk about Ductrio. But yeah, like if you're running Expert Belt, you will need a little bit of chip damage. But still, that can be worth it, considering like if they don't see Life Orb recoil, they're thinking, oh, this thing is specs. I'm going to switch in Ductrio, knock you out, or knock this thing out, and you have Empower Ice. You're either knocking it out, or is just doing so much damage that it's likely not going to be able to trap anything else like the rest of the game.
Yeah, yeah. So again, Jolteon, hard hitter. I do want to say that also the Life Orb set, if Magneton isn't running any HP, which there are some Magnetons that do run HP and they're slower, and then there's also, like I know Shake It Up, he runs a bulky one on his for wish support, be able to switch into Scalds and stuff like that. But if it's not running in a Violet, if it's Specs and it's not running any bulk, Life Orb Thunderbolt does like 47% minimum to Magneton. So with Stealth Arc up, you're 2KOing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jolteon is just one of. If you're wanting speed control, like without a Scarf user, then this is one of the 3 Pokemon you're picking.
Yeah,
the other
Selgor,
2, yeah, Excelgor, Aerodactyl being the other 2.
Exactly.
So it's definitely a really good option for offensive teams. Just make sure that you're not counting on it to take many hits, if any at all, simply because it's not going to take them at all.
Exactly. Speaking about electric types, we actually have another one, and I think that'll be the last one that we go over in this video, and probably the best. I want to say the best electric type in the tier.
Without a doubt.
I think without Dugtrio in the tier, it would be. It's already one of the best Pokemon in the tier, but if Dugtrio was gone, I think this thing would be even better, like way better. And I also don't think Alomola would be a problem if Dugtrio was gone. That's just my, that's just my 2 cents right there.
I mean, I can see that, but
but Magneton is the next Pokemon in the tier, and this thing, Choice Specs Analytic. Choice Specs already gives you the boost. Analytic is giving you the boost of a Life Orb upon switching. It's 1.3, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's 1.3.
Yeah, it's 1.3.
Yeah, so for those that might not be like, oh, does Analytic boosted it unless you go last? Analytic also boosts if you switch out. If your opponent switches out, you're technically going last in that turn. They switched out their Pokemon first, so you can just smack Pokemon with Specs, Analytic, Thunderbolts, Flash Cannons, Volt Switch. Even if you resist, you're being 2-hit KO'd by this. The only Pokemon that's actually not being 2-hit KO'd is probably Spadef Registeel. And even then, Thunderbolt from Flash Cannon anyway, it's not being 2-hit KO'd. It's something like 25-30% from Flash Cannon. But Specs Thunderbolt.
Specs Thunderbolt's doing like what, about 50?
Yeah,
I think,
close to 50. Yeah. So no longer an answer to you, and it's a check to Fletchinder easily just because of its dual stab. It doesn't care about being burnt with Heal Bell support, and it's just one of the hardest hitters in the tier to switch into. I'm actually going to talk about one of the problems with it, and you can talk about how great it is even more if you want.
Okay.
But I think one of the main problems with Magneton, especially if you see Dugtrio on a team, if it's a Dugtrio Alomola team, is crap. I can't spam Thunderbolt or Volt Switch just yet. Especially if they have Alomola out and you are running Specs, you're usually forced to go for Flash Cannon, even if they protect, and they can just stay in or switch to something respectively, because Dugtrio is just so scary in the back that it just forces you to have a certain type of play with Magneton. I think that's one of the main drawbacks of it. Obviously, it's base 70 speed. It's low, but it's not low enough that it matters because it's still taking hits from Pokemon that are faster than it. Like Venusaur, for example. Specs Leaf Storm, or not Specs. Life Orb Leaf Storm is doing a hell of a lot, but you'd still resist its dual stab. If it's defensive, you're 2-hit KOing with Flash Cannon. You gotta worry about obviously the Sleep Powder, but outside of that, Magneton is just such a great offensive threat, and you can take it away, bro.
Yeah, so like you said, like it's one of the best Pokemon in the tier, easily. Like you want an answer for this, like non-negotiable. You need to make sure you have a reliable way of beating this. Otherwise, it's just like spamming moves. It's just clicking moves, spamming them, and like resist does not mean survive.
Yeah, exactly.
We went over it. We've gone over this like with pretty much every hard hitter in the tier, but it holds true with Magneton as well. Like even Mega Camera, like even if it's already Mega Evolved, if it switches into Flash Cannon, it's 2-hit KO'd, like just straight up, and that's not a frail resistance. Like that's got like base 105 special defense and a resistance to Flash Cannon. It's still getting straight 2-hit KO'd on the switch in.
Yeah.
So that just kind of gives you an idea of how powerful like Specs Analytic Magneton is. I will say most run Modest over Timid, so definitely kind of be wary of that. Don't calc Timid, calc Modest, because most are going to be running Modest because it still outspeeds X-Cloud, it outspeeds Emboar, it outspeeds it still like outspeeds most other bulky attackers
But
in the team.
you can run Timid if you want to outspeed like Jolly Ember and things like along those lines.
Yeah.
Timid Exploud, excuse me.
Yeah.
If you're really fearing those.
Yeah, and I do agree with you that any team with Alomomola Dugtrio is very, very hard for Magneton to deal with. And I'll use like a kind of funny meme within the community, but pivoted on by Alomomola and trapped by Dugtrio. That's pretty much where it originated from.
Yeah.
Like, Alomomola can come in, if you click Thunderbolt and Alomomola clicks Protects, you pretty much have to switch out.
Yeah.
Because Dugtrio is coming in 100%.
Yeah.
Like,
Though
there's no reason for it not to.
Yeah, though there have been times like if you doubled enough, maybe your opponent might get a little bit cheeky. I actually had that going on a couple times in a live where I Thunderbolted,
saw that.
and I was like, yeah, you know what? I did this double like 4 times. Let me just Thunderbolt again. He ended up staying with Alamola, and then I lost Magneton to Dugtrio. Yeah, but I only needed Magneton for Alamola.
Yeah.
So from there, it was just a win from there. Or
Yeah,
also win.
and that just kind of goes to show like the counterplay in the tier. Like, yeah, Dugtrio is really, really powerful force. So is Alomomola, but that just goes to show what conditioning can do. Like, you can condition your opponent into thinking you're going to make the safe play every time, and then boom, you make the aggressive play, they're gone. Like,
Yeah.
you did what you needed to do. But aside from that, like, Magneton is just really powerful Pokemon. The speed does hold it back some, but it outspeeds all the key defensive Pokemon in the tier, so it's not a huge hindrance.
Yeah.
Just understand that you're gonna need, if you want it to perform well against offensive teams, you'll need paralysis support. You'll just want to rely on another Pokemon to beat up offense.
And having Stab, Flash Cannon in a tier where Diancie, Rhyperior, Aromatisse, just fairy types in general, and bulky grounds and rocks are running around, it just helps so well. Actually, as a last move on Magneton, there is option of HP Water, but again, that only hits Camera Up as well as Rhyperior. I typically run HP Grass. That allows you to deal with Seismitoad. That allows you to deal with Rhyperior. And Camera Up is being 2 KO'd sometimes by Flash Cannon anyway, depending on the hazards up and how much damage is taken. But Flash Cannon smacks that hard anyway. And
yeah, and even if it's not somehow,
you can just switch.
Yeah, you can just switch, and it can't switch in anymore. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
It's kind of same principle as Exploud. Where your Flash Cannon switch-ins, aside from like Registeel, Bronzong, those sorts of things, they're 3 KO'd, so they have one switch-in, that's it. They can't switch in again.
Yeah, exactly. It's just one of the mons that creates its own, like, it breaks down its own checked encounters on its own. And obviously there's also the option of running a Violite, but I just love choice specs so much.
So do I. One other thing I do want to note, you mentioned like HP Grass. You can also run Hidden Power Ice if bulky variants of Flygon are a nuisance for your team, because bulkier variants of Flygon will take Flash Cannon. They do have Roost. So you can just have Hidden Power Ice and just take them out on the switch-in, because it doesn't matter how bulky Flygon is. Analytics pegs HP Ice is taking that thing out.
Exactly.
Like it doesn't matter the bulk it's running.
Yeah, exactly. It's boosted by that. But again, Magneton is such a great mon in the tier. And again, Shake has actually gotten to #1 in the RU. And what he did was he ran a really bulky variant. That way he could take weak Scalds from Blastoise, Slowcan, the Stabs from Venusaur Better, and just wish past to it. And also get off of Slow Volt Switch. That's also an option. But typically, I just like to run fast specs. I want to outspeed everything, and I want to hit hard. That's
I'm definitely a bulkier Violite spec sets can be used, and definitely have their use, like you said, as Shake has shown. And for those of you who don't know who he is one of the best RU players, like probably better than me. But I mean, that's not a knock on myself. That's just testament to how good he is.
He's been playing RU for a long time, so.
Yeah, I mean, he's played RU ever since it started, like back in Black and White, and I caught on toward the end of Black and White. But he's really experienced player, so like whenever like you see one of his teams on the forum, know that unless it's like an RU Pride team or something, it's probably really good. But yeah, it's definitely viable to run bulkier sets with Magneton with specs, because then you get the analytic boost on more Pokemon. And you can obviously take the weaker Scalds and resisted attacks and that sort of thing. But like you, I typically stick to just max speed modest, just so I can outspeed Exploud and more, that sort of thing.
Yeah, Again, it's just such a great mon, and actually, its speed might not be that much, but it does outspeed like the Pokemon it needs, like Specs Exploud, modest specs anyway. And again, it's just one of the hardest hitters in the tier. Do you have anything else to say about it?
Not really. It's just, like I said, make sure you have reliable ways of handling it, because if you don't, it's gonna make you pay instantly. And like I said, modest base 70 doesn't sound like a lot, but it's enough for what it needs to do. Like, it outspeeds everything it needs to with modest, and obviously if you fear timid, X-Bile, Jolly, and more, those sorts of things, you can run timid, but you lose a lot of power that way.
Exactly. But overall, great mon in the tier, one of the best mons in the tier. And
Fantastic.
I think with that, we're actually just going to be ending it right now. So thank you everybody for watching. I know this was an hour and 15 minutes.
Crap.
It was a long episode, but we don't want this to drag on too much. Like I said, there are only going to be 2 episodes left, and we got through 10 mons today. I hope you guys are enjoying the series. Again, it's one of those series that you don't have to look at your screen, or you just talk and chill, and hopefully you start to understand the RU tier. That's the main point of the series.
Yeah, like, I guess on that, I will point out, I've had a few people, at least in the RU Showdown room, like whenever I get on, like to ladder or whatever, they've kind of told me that it has helped them, that they're glad we're doing this, and that's the point of this. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're taking the time to do this. It's not because we feel we have to. It's because we want to help you guys. We want to help you guys get into the tier.
Exactly.
And kind of know what you're getting into, know the threats you have to deal with, know what each Pokemon can and can't do. And I mean, to me, that's what helps newer players the most. Just being able,
so, yeah.
Just being able to know the limits of each Pokemon in the tier. That way, you're not trying something you shouldn't or anything like that. Then thinking, oh, I'm no good at this tier. I just give up on it, move on to another tier or something like that.
And I think that even, not even just for RU, I think just knowing what a Pokemon does in general can help in any tier. Like, for example, for me, if I see a Pokemon like, let's say somebody brings, let me just go through a random Pokemon in RU. Let's say someone brings Meloetta into an OU battle. If I don't know what Meloetta does, I might struggle a bit versus it, but I know Meloetta can run the other set with Relic Song, it can run Specs, it has access to U-Turn, just based on the fact that I just play all these tiers. So just the knowledge of the Pokemon in general can help you not only learning the RU tier, but also just in general if somebody just wants to bring something like that versus you and try and throw you off. So
yeah, and obviously we've seen lately, like, some RU Pokemon are perfectly viable in OU, like Tangrowth and Amogus went straight from RU to OU, and if you didn't, like, maybe play RU, you didn't know what they did at first, you probably lost a couple of battles because of that. But just in general, like, just knowing what each Pokemon can and can't do, it helps within the tier, within higher tiers that they may be used in. Like, I know in UU there's definitely some perfectly viable Pokemon from RU that work pretty well in UU, so just in general, like, just the knowledge is power.
Exactly. Pretty much Tai Lopez knowledge. But in any case, guys, again, I hope you all enjoyed. Feel free to leave a like. Check out the playlist if you missed any of the other ones. And also, you can check out my boy's Twitter down below. He also goes by EonX on Showdown in the RU room typically, right? So
yeah, I'm usually in the RU room and UU room, as well as the fact that, yeah, I pretty much answer every question on Twitter that gets asked me, so.
Yeah, so, again, really helpful dude, very great dude. And again, guys, hope y'all enjoyed. Goodbye, friends.
Goodbye.